This is episode 4 of Sam and Max. This is the first cold opener we had. This is the, also, should say, Bay Area Sound Audio Commentary. I'm Jared Emerson Johnson.
Julian Kwasniewski.
And this first cold opener I loved, and my little tribute to Tubular Bells from The Exorcist here. It's just so over the top and ridiculous. And then into our Sam and Max theme.
That's Roger Jackson there.
As the
demon bug.
As the demon bug, yeah. Roger Jackson, who also is the voice of Abraham Lincoln.
Yep.
And also the voice of the Scream Ghost,
That's
if I'm
right.
not mistaken.
Yep.
From the Scream movies. And the wah-wah-wah on the phone is none other than Julian Kwasniewski.
Wah-wah, wah-wah-wah-wah.
Jay Kwaz.
And I might also add that for all you youngins, phones used to be dialed like that. There was a rotary dial.
Tell me more about the
Tell
phones.
me more. Tell me more about the early 80s.
Sam and Max they're kind of stuck in the early 80s emotionally.
Good.
It is good.
What else is new?
You can make a lot of money as an 80s cover band.
Tell me more about the 80s
Right.
cover band.
So, he's curtailing civil liberties.
And this...
The holster pull.
This, I know a lot of the fans, with this episode, they started talking about the season very differently. And I think it's just because it was such a shock to... First, the cold opener, I think, really... changes the feel of this episode, and also the fact that it just dumps you right out there on the White House lawn right at the very beginning. It's like, for one, they're not, confined to sort of the New York thing. I mean, I think WARP and the Toy Mafia, I mean, I love those stories and they're great, but to suddenly find yourself in the White House, and then in the next one, Reality 2.0 is such a big thing, and then to the moon for episode 6, such a huge jump. I think it's a part of the Sam and Max universe that people really like in the comics, which is that they can just kind of go anywhere and there's no restrictions to that. And having... it's gruesome. I love that the White House mailbox is the White House.
I have to point out, Sam, that we could have avoided this gruesome...
So musically, this episode obviously had a fairly different flavor from the other ones, which was another fun thing for me. I was really... I always try with each of these episodes to have them hold together very much as their own unit, kind of, separate from the whole season at large, while still fitting into some kind of overarching sound. But this one definitely has that Americana feel. And,
Doug Boyd here as the President of the United States. And he is so fun to work with. This was a hilarious session, and
Doug's one of those voice actors who's such a pro, who's been doing it for such a long time, and he knows it better than anybody, and he knows what will work better than anybody, and he can do so many different... He can do pretty much any voice you'd want to have him do, and he's a sweet
really
guy.
good guy, and a lot of Sam and Max has a lot of little jabs and jokes about politics, and it was just funny to hear his outtakes, and many of which were unsuitable for public consumption.
Highly political.
Highly
Political charge.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He's been hypnotized. We've got to...
And Chuckles, return of Vegas trip, as Chuckles.
We hit him over the head.
I wanted to, especially after the third game, I wanted Chuckles to be very clearly not just this sort of subdued, sinister mobster that he is in episode 3, but in 4 to really be a huge butthead and just a real jerk. And he's so rude, and he's always kind of pissed off and angry and everything he says in this episode, which I thought was pretty funny. And Vegas did very well with that direction. It was fun.
It's kind of hard to hear the ambience in a lot of these areas, especially in a room like this, but we intentionally took a film approach there and put room tone in rooms, and when you're outside, outside the White House is this nice cheepy birds and distant traffic, and there's subtle little things, and if you were to mute them, you would notice their absence. A lot of times you don't necessarily consciously notice them when they're in, but it really makes a big difference.
It's one of those things with a lot of people. I find it's so funny, they just don't think about it. And I know that before, when I was growing up, before I was a real audiophile and I was a kid, I never ever thought about it with cartoons. But cartoons don't make sound.
Right.
There's no sound that is made by a cartoon. And to realize that for anything you hear, birds chirping outside, or just room tone, just the sound of an empty room being still, is all is all sort of handcrafted by sound guys.
Yep.
It's something that often isn't considered. I mean, it's obviously true in film as well with live action because of the way that it's put together. But I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that in a cartoon, it's all made after the fact.
Where do you think you're going?
I've got to get in there! Bad!
We've got a priority red number 2.
We have a lot of fun with these. This here,
No,
God,
just
Whizzer.
number 1.
Whizzer is just such a disturbing person, but I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for him because it seems, of all the 3 soda poppers, he seems to be trying the hardest to be a normal person, and for whatever reason, he just can't quite do it and falls apart.
Now it's time for some checks and balances.
And that sound, I love.
Max, will you do the honors?
Gladly.
His head just sounds like it's so heavy,
My fingertips look like
made out of concrete or something. And the little screwing with the soda poppers theme pops in there earlier when you're with Wizard. For those who are keeping track of all the themes as they come by, we'll have a quiz on the themes as we at the end of the episode. I'll be passing out some forms.
Punishable by something gruesome for failure.
Yes.
But who was controlling him?
Here's Chuckles going off in his riff, and this is in the background for those keeping track of themes, the plotting evil tasks theme that you can first hear in some of Brady Culture's soliloquies in the first
It was a deep tissue massage
First
done
episode.
horribly wrong. Ninjas.
Sam did it!
Still, ratings from the last State of the Union address were even lower than reruns of mid.
It's funny, all these. It's another thing, going back to what you were saying about how cartoons are silent and how you don't really necessarily know when you're younger that everything is intentionally placed. And with the voices here, the amount of voice mastering we had to do to compensate for each person's, human
Natural
qualities.
boominess in the bass registers,
Yeah,
or
different
or
volumes, different
high-pitchedness, or
pitches. And
breathiness, whatever.
the idea is, in the end, you don't notice that. You just listen and you hear, and nothing stands out as, whoa, that was incredibly loud, or... And so it's something that, again, we took that kind of film approach, and really every asset that went into the game, we not only created it for a reason, but then we, mastered it such that it would sound appropriate.
And speaking of the little servo sounds that you hear whenever Lincoln moves, the little robotic, sounds. That was something. Now, after we gave Dave a very hard time on the commentary for number 3.
Here's where we make it up to you, Dave.
Here's where we make it up to you. He was totally happy to have us do that for this.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because we were so harsh about the bear heads. But it wasn't in the original design necessarily that Lincoln would be making these robotic sounds, but the idea to me was hilarious that first of all, giant statue of Abraham Lincoln animating is funny, but then to add the fact that it's like a mechanical robot that Chuckles has somehow modified just seems all the funnier to me. And all those sounds, it's very funny. And if you listen there, every time he does any little movement, like right there, it's in there.
I think what's great about Dave and Brendan is that, and the whole team, is that it was a highly collaborative experience, and it continues to be as we move forward to season 2. And it's just, it's wonderful to be on a team where you're not just fulfilling sound lists. We're really integrated into the project, and a lot of the audio really carries many of the jokes, and it just accentuates things, and obviously the music brings the emotion, and
all these little themes in here. It's a lot like, for those who are fans of the Bone score, my Smiley Bone theme incorporated a lot of kind of more rustic Americana folk and
this is a bit irregular.
some bluegrass. Well, mostly folk and
Beloved president in history. So I just
sort of
assumed
early
I'd be running
American
unopposed.
popular song into that. And this I was trying to do a very similar thing with
I freed the slave.
more of the sort of Americana, a lot of Civil War hymns, a lot of, obviously, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and some of John Philip Sousa in there, and Hail to the Chief, of
Spirit
course.
of democracy.
It's always fun. I've always loved taking recognizable tunes and sort of tweaking them and meshing them and morphing them and having them run into each other and turn them into a new thing. I especially especially the sort of twisted "Hail to the Chief" that appears in here. It's become my new favorite way of hearing that music, and without going into politics too much. Sometimes when I see our president on the television, I hear that sort of version of the "Hail to the Chief" in my brain, and
Sum up. Family values.
it gets me through the day. It gets me through the day until 2009 January
When something else will
something
happen.
else will happen. Who knows? Perhaps you're listening to that at that time, and maybe we're worse
Maybe it's
off.
already happened.
Who's to say?
Mr. Lincoln.
I believe we have a question in the audience from someone
Poor
who is
Sybil.
not candidate Lincoln's lawyer.
We love Sybil.
We do love
And speaking of voice talent,
Yeah.
Amy Provenzano,
Provenzano.
just wonderful person as well. And
Very sweet.
it's almost criminal how
talented
much
person.
fun we have in those sessions.
Never seen this woman before
And we
in
actually
my
get things done, too.
But on the phone, you sounded
Believe it or
so
not.
eager to meet me.
life. Listen to me, America.
We actually, Telltale has I talked about the audio engine a little while ago, and they have a series of file names that generate these code numbers, and so we quickly had to come up with a way to record the dialogue. And when you look at a file name, you have no idea who it is or where it goes.
It's called 763-5987.
.wave. And so we came up with this great system where we output scripts in a certain order, and it's all automated. There's no paper script, so we're not contributing to the deforestation in the Pacific Northwest and other parts of the world.
The news much better than expected.
This is great.
This episode is where the bleeping kind of
Yeah, I was
started
just
to
gonna-
get
I
a
heard
little
that,
bit out of hand, and it's good. I hope there's a lot more bleeping in season 2 because
Well, what's really bleeping funny about it is that the some of the actors, they knew that bleep was coming, so they would just insert an expletive there to, make it sound real when we put the bleeps in.
And
But
sometimes they were
very
really
inappropriate.
harsh. Especially William Caston came up with
Some
very,
great ones.
a very colorful statement. I believe it's in his joke that he tells, the droll story joke that happens in that piece of dialogue. If you were to hear the unbeeped version, you'd
be writing to the company.
You'd probably be writing, and there'd probably be some kind of coalition with an acronym.
And we would get in a lot of trouble because we recorded it. But actually, the bleeping is actually a process, so it happens after the fact.
Right.
So since it was such a furious schedule, we often delivered the raw takes so that the animators could get good, the chore tool guys could go with it and get the timings down, and then we would do the bleeping pass, and we would go through and add the bleeps. And boy, I'll tell you, there were some moments where we couldn't get those bleeped ones in fast enough.
No.
Just on the chance that it would ship.
That it would ship with this incredibly not rated T for teen, or
not rated
E
anything.
for everyone,
It's
or
absolutely
rated
AB,
rated
absolutely
no
brutal.
for lawsuit.
Rated L.
But this is that scene I was talking about in the episode 3 commentary, where you hear the fully realized version of the Screwing with the Soda Poppers music, and it's got that wonderful kind of horn thing. And I don't know if we're about to see the complete war song, but that's what follows here. I think we are, yeah. This this song, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was the first. Well, it was the only musical number that was originally in the plan for the whole season. From the very beginning, when they were first outlining the whole arc of the season, I know they earmarked this as where they wanted to have a musical number. But because, as I said earlier, I put together the Little Soda Poppers theme for the first episode just because I thought it would be amusing, we got to talking, and it kind of became an ongoing shtick, to have some live music. But this was the one that was planned out from the very beginning, and so much fun to do this kind of Charleston style.
Yeah.
1920s, oh baby!
It
song,
totally came together,
yeah.
too.
And the performances, the very sort of authentic performances by Mike Whitwell and Jordan Wardlaw on the sax, clarinet, and trumpet. And that's me singing, all of them. That must be why all the agents look so similar. And all these dances. just so ridiculous. It was very important to me also early on that if, they said show-stopping musical number, so I wanted to make sure that it really had the full deal. So I wrote in this big dance break, and I think some people weren't necessarily expecting that, and it, of course, created this sort of vacuum where it was like, well, we need to now animate a huge dance break for like a minute, and I know that a lot of people got pulled off of other various tasks to help with that, but the end result, as far as I'm concerned, is just incredible.
When's the last time you saw something like this in a game? Now, come on.
Seriously. And Jordan's just wailing on the clarinet there. And you have that air siren in there in place of the sort of fire engine siren that you might have heard in a 1920s thing. What is he doing on that couch? That's always disturbed me a little. I don't know what he's doing. But it's so much fun. And I love music from the 20s and 30s and 40s, and it's some of my favorite stuff. And I have a somewhat of a background in American musical theater and have done a lot of performing, and all of this repertoire is some of my favorite stuff in the world, and to have a chance to do something like that for a game is an opportunity that comes
but once.
Comes down the line but once, although who's to say what might happen
in season
2. But let's maybe one more time clean up and aisle everything.
Well, let's not do that
Is
again.
this is the episode where Bosco is
Attention, Bosco shoppers.
Russian,
Clean
I
up and
believe.
aisle everything.
I don't think we had the cutscene. We may have been talking over it earlier, but there's a cutscene when Bosco is Russian, where if you listen to the background music, it's sort of a loungy, like Nordstrom piano guy version of the Russian national anthem. If you listen, it's
But for how long?
it's one of my little musical jokes that's probably only funny to me, but I love that kind of stuff.
Don't mind if
Oh,
I
look out. There we go. Speaking of those servo noises, it's going crazy.
revel a little.
We don't want to
And-
miss this.
All do my bidding.
And Chuckles is just so brutally murdered. He's just dead. And we're about to hear that Sam and Max music that first appeared on the Myra show.
That was better than feeding laxatives to pigeons on parade days.
The starts and ends of these are always very tricky to put together, just because, like anything, you want it to feel like it's wrapping up, but then, it's also a continuous thing, so that's always something you have to kind of sit down and consider musically when you're putting music together for these kinds of things, especially these where it's always ending with a little hint of something that is to come. You want it to feel like it's continuing on, but also feel like it's wrapped up so that the player isn't just annoyed for the next month.
Error.
And we'll see you next in Reality 2.0.